Okay, welcome to AP European History with Dr. Brovkin. We continue to talk about the demise of Napoleon. So this is part two, and it has to do with the last two great battles of Napoleon, and that's the Battle of Leipzig, 1913, and then Waterloo, 1813, 1815. So here's the situation. Napoleon comes back after the Russian defeat and he confronts a totally new situation in Europe. And one of the great things that he discovers is that the Austrians, who he thought would be abiding by the treaties that he had signed, numerous treaties with him, are no longer willing. They basically renounce all the treaties, thinking correctly that Napoleon is weak, and and uh, basically declare war on him. So he has to fight the Austrians and the Prussians that they're encouraged now that Napoleon is weak. So in a sense, they betray him. He trusted them. You know, a lot of people say he should have destroyed the Habsburgs when he had a chance instead of marrying their daughter. But he didn't. And so now he has to confront a new challenge that the Austrians and the Prussians declare war on him. So again, he has to confront all three allies, Austria, Prussia, and Russia, gang up, and they pursue his army. Now, Napoleon still is a great commander, and he still manages with inferior forces to defeat the Prussians on a couple of occasions, but they do prevent him from taking Berlin, and his forces are his army is about 185,000 French, are in Leipzig, which is a city southwest of Berlin. And confronting him are 385,000 Allied army, led personally by Alexander I of Russia. So, which proves that Alexander was trying to get even with Napoleon after his defeat at Austerlitz. It does show that he was taking it personally, that he did not respond to any proposals of peace, and now it doesn't allow it to his generals, he leaves it himself. So you have Russia, Prussia, Sweden, and Austria, four countries confronting Napoleon. And as I said, he did manage to defeat several battles with the Prussians, but this time they do manage to surround him and surround his armies in Leipzig, and he has no choice but to give them a battle. That is, I had a student once who did a study of all the battles of Napoleon, and one thing that he always tried to do is to fight all his enemies at the same time. The reason he prevailed in Austerlitz was because he defeated the Austrians first, and then the Russians, and then the Austrians and the Russians together. This time, he has all the three armies, the Russian, the Prussian, and the Austrian, converging against him, kind of surrounding him in Leipzig. So he has no choice but to give battle in Leipzig with inferior forces, 185 against 385. So it's a huge difference, 200,000 troops extra that the Allies have, and he is defeated. So this is the one would say this is the first real defeat on the battlefield, because Borodino in Russia, he did win the battle, he lost the war. Now you have a battle, a huge one, that he loses. And that means the end. I mean, that means he is retreating with his defeated French army, and the Allies pursue him. And now they're actually entering France. And for the first time since over 20 years, the foreign troops are threatening Paris and are on French territory. And it is in the spring of 1814 that Napoleon is in Paris, to be specifically in Fontainebleau. And I actually was in that room where his generals ask him to sign abdication to papers because he's defeated. The city is in the hands of the Allies, and Napoleon is devastated. I mean, it's a crumbling of his life work. Everything is gone with one battle. I mean, it took him so many hard battles to reach where he had, and then one battle changes it all. One battle of Leipzig essentially seals his fate. Here's what happens. The um, uh, the Allies sentenced him to be exiled to the island of Elba in the Mediterranean. It's a small island, not far from Italy. It's a beautiful island. I was there actually, and I went to the house where he lived. And he is a governor. I mean, he can rule island of Elba whichever way he can. So he becomes, after ruling Europe, he's given to govern a tiny island. It's a beautiful island off Italian coast, and from Elba you could actually see Corsica, which is the island that it all started, where he grew up, his native Corsica. It's very interesting, but it is an Italian island. So in a sense, he's kind of back to where he had started from, an Italian island in the Mediterranean, where he is. And he stays there for close to a year, watching what's going on in France. By the way, I forgot to mention, which is a wonderful episode. You probably know that in Paris, when you go to a cafe, a lot of them are called bistrot. And very few people know that the origin of the word bistro comes from the Russian word bystro. And bystro in modern Russian or any Russian, you look up in the dictionary, it means quickly. Apparently, it's the first fast food that the Russians invented. They were going around Paris, the Cossacks, bistro, 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 meaning give me something to eat quickly. And that is why the Parisian cafes are called bistro. So Russian contribution, or the Cossack contribution to French cafe culture. In any case, the Russian Cossacks are in Paris, and the Congress of Vienna opens with the French representatives in there, Talleyrand, and they are beginning to talk about who is going to get what and stuff like that. And it takes many, many months. Speaking of Congress of Vienna, they did offer pretty good conditions the first time around for France, that she could keep some of her conquests, not completely stripping her of everything. Um, in any case, it all comes to the next dramatic chapter, which is called 100 jours, or 100 days, and that is Napoleon's dramatic return to France. So Napoleon does, as you know, follow politics. He is watching what's happening in France from Elba. He has his informers, and he reads newspapers, and there are people telling him what's going on. And what's going on basically is called Restoration. The Allies put in power Louis XVIII, who is a uncle of the killed King Louis XVI, and he's vastly unpopular. Uh, there's all kinds of things that they argue. He doesn't want to accept the French tricolor flag, the blue, white, and red. And the French army just can't live with any other flag. I mean, they marched all over Europe. There's no way you could force the French to abandon that flag. That becomes a big, big issue. And he wants the white flag with the three lilies, the Bourbon flag. And so then there's just a big confrontation over the flag issue. The second confrontation, they restore the previous nobility and the lands. And then there are people who have been using these lands for 20 years, and now they want to take it back and give it to the immigrants. People who are seen in France as traitors, who had worked and lived with foreign armies and countries, and they're absolutely detested. These nobles who come back and start showing their power. So very quickly, within a few months, everybody begins to detest Louis XVIII and the regime that he represents, the restoration of the old order. Napoleon knows all this. And finally, in the spring of 1815, Napoleon decides to do one last chance to win back at least France. So this is a magnificent moment because Napoleon lands in Cannes, in the city of Cannes, with 1,500 men. And news very quickly spreads that l'Empereur is back. And then the government, Louis, sends the troops against him. And then at a crucial moment, um, one of his marshals, I'm sorry I don't remember, it's either Murat or Ney, that is confronting him with his band of 1,000 men. Uh, and he's supposed to destroy. He's sent with the orders to destroy Napoleon's landing. Instead, this marshal, goes on his knees and asks forgiveness, and he says, "Your Majesty, the French army is always with you." It's a fantastic moment, and they just change sides and join Napoleon. Vive la France, vive Napoleon, and then they march on Paris. And as soon as this happens, Louis runs, abandons everything, and triumphantly the emperor enters Paris, which shows one more time that the French people really loved their emperor, regardless even forgiving him his disaster in Russia. So Napoleon is back in power in Paris, and the time is the spring of 1815. And of course, he knows he has to hurry because the Allies are ganging up on him. And that time specifically, it is England that joins the war and is sending an army across the Channel to confront Napoleon under the command of Wellington, Duke Wellington. And then his immediate danger is Wellington, and then the Prussian army under the command of General Blücher, who is marching from Prussia towards Belgium. So the next chapter is called the Battle of Waterloo, which also is a museum now in Belgium, and that's one of the most dramatic battles, and one of the most controversial ones, because it still is not clear who won. Now, in a sense, the Allies won because Napoleon basically is ousted from power. But if you look at the battle itself, it's a little more complicated. So the British, of course, claim a great victory of Wellington on the battlefield. The French says, no way, this is not true. It's Napoleon who won against Wellington. So who is right and who is wrong? Well, this is how it happened. On June 18th, you have 72,000 French army confronting 68,000 British army in the field of Waterloo. And some people say that every hour is important, especially this time, because of what happened that day. So basically, the day before there was a rain and it was very wet. And Napoleon waited for the grass to dry up a little bit before ordering the assault on the British. And the assault begins at noon. And by 8 o'clock, he's winning. This absolutely no doubt whatsoever. The British are beaten and they're retreating. However, at that same moment, on the horizon, you see the army of Blücher, the Prussians, entering the neighborhood. And the arrival of the Blücher army changes the current. And together, when the beaten Wellington and the arriving Blücher overwhelm the French, and Napoleon is defeated. Napoleon later wrote, "If I had 2 more hours, I would have won Waterloo." He would have defeated the British to a point of no return, and then confronted the Prussians, who probably would not have been able to defeat Napoleon on their own. So it's really a case of just a few hours that could have changed the course of history. Some people say if he had started his assault at 9 in the morning rather than 12, he would have finished Wellington by the time the Prussians arrived. In any case, the result, of course, is that the French army is defeated. Napoleon goes back to Paris, and the same thing has to happen again. He is forced to abdicate, and this time they decide to send him a little bit more far away. So he is under the guards of the British, who will control him until his death. So he's exiled to the south, to the island of St. Helena, which is far away in the Pacific. And he stays there until his death in 1822. And the recent speculation has been that he was poisoned by the British. That he was relatively young, he's 50 something years old, and that it was very suspicious that he died there. But to make a full inquiry, one would have to do the exhumation and the chemical analysis and all that stuff. They didn't do this, but there is really good speculation that he was poisoned by the British in St. Helena. In any case, the same thing happens as was before. The Allies enter Paris. They depose Napoleon. They install Louis XVIII one more time. And this period in French history is called as the Restauration, that would last until the next French Revolution in 1830. So that would be this would be a series of French revolutions in the 19th century, which we will study in due course. But that puts an end effectively to the rule of Napoleon. And I want to say a few words about the significance of Napoleon's era. So there's so much that happened that one great significance conclusion is that Europe could not be brought back to restoration the way the Allies wanted in the Congress of Vienna. It's just impossible. The Code Civil that Napoleon spread all over Europe, the abolition of serfdom, the very psychology of a world in which for 20 years people heard fraternité, égalité, liberté cannot be changed. I would say the most important consequence of the French Revolution and the rule of Napoleon is the idea of la grande nation. In a way, I put it like this: everybody wants to be la grande nation. The French example of a nation that can achieve impossible results thanks to its leadership and its freedom and its self-awareness, it becomes a kind of a shining example for all Europe to follow. So in a sense, one could say this is the beginning of the age of nationalism, where everybody wants to imitate the French. And it would be, as we shall see, all of the nations. Italians would want to have la grande nation, and the Germans would want to have la grande nation, and the Poles, and the Greeks, and the Irish, and the Czechs, and the Hungarians, and everybody, in a sense, that opens up the era of national liberation movements that all would imitate, in a sense, France of the revolutionary period with their grande nation, with a great nation under liberty, fraternity, and equality for all. And on that, we shall finish, my dear boys and girls. Don't forget to tell your friends to sign up to my videos, AP European History with Dr. Brovkin. Thank you.